new series called Why in the World. And we looked at one of the reasons that Jesus came was so that he could demonstrate what the Father was like. And we looked at the various aspects of his ministry and why, because it's very different. Christians believe that God became one of us. It's a unique teaching, and there are no other religions that believe that. None of them say that God took on human form, came to earth, and lived among us, and then died for us. I mean, it's a very unique aspect of Christianity that most of the world look at. It's kind of funny. Even John, who eyewitness, who believed, after Jesus was crucified, he gave up. The thing that we forget sometimes is that Jesus' death, before his resurrection, there were no Christians. There were no followers, because they had all abandoned it. Peter ran away, John ran, they all left to be crucified alone. Nobody was still his follower. They were in hiding. Mary went and the other ladies, and they believed that he had risen from the dead. They thought he was a gardener. After Jesus confronted them, they realized that he was alive. And then we had Peter, and they have the race down to the tomb. Gets there, and John won't go in. Go in the tomb originally. Only Peter does. And then John comes in afterwards, and they both declare that he's alive, that he's risen from the dead, just as he said. And as at that point, they became believers, and not a moment before. So, even John, who was the last of the disciples, he was the only one that wasn't executed. Only one who wasn't executed for his faith. Thomas and John and Paul, all those other disciples died proclaiming that Jesus had risen from the dead. And John, he was exiled to the island of Patmos by the Emperor Domitian. And he wrote these words: "And the Word became flesh and dwelt with us." Christians believe that God was one, just a stranger on the bus, somebody who for 30 years lived undercover as a carpenter and surfaced as a miracle worker and a rabbi for 3 years, and allowed himself to die on the most degrading, humiliating way possible. He came as one of us, but he was less than one of us. We know all that. We know that intellectually. We know that's what Scripture teaches. Why? Why one of us? Well, I know the Sunday school answer. He came to die for us. But that kind of ignores the real reason why he came. It's like you getting called to the principal's office, and your dad's standing there, and he look at him and say, "Why are you here?" And he looks at you and says, "Okay, to take you home." And kind of ignores the fact that, why am I going home? What did I do? Why did he come as one of us and as us? Like I said, last week we discovered that one of the reasons that he came was to demonstrate and communicate what God is like. Jesus didn't claim to have the best explanation of God. He claimed to be an explanation of God. He was God incarnate, God in the flesh. The Son of Man came so that we might know the Father. He said, No one has ever seen God, but the one Son, who is himself God and is in closest relationship with the Father, has made him known, explained him. That's so important because if there is a God, we all want to know what he's like. After all, believers, when the biggest thing that's going to happen to us is not heaven. Yes, I know. But it isn't that. The streets of gold and the mansions and all the other stuff they talk about, that's gravy. You know what's really important about us dying and going to heaven? Is that we're restored to that relationship with God the Father. Like it said in Genesis 1:1, God came and walked with the garden. He had an intimate fellowship with Adam and Eve. And so we're going to restore that relationship once we move on. And if we die or if he comes back, no matter what happens, we spend eternity with him. And if you want to know what he's like, then you look at the Son. Because the Son is the perfect explanation of who God the Father is. One of the most helpful things you can do is read the stories of Jesus. Read the Gospels. And look for clues about the Father. I gave you homework. Remember last week? Read through the Gospels, and as you did so, you were to write down and jot down what you learned about the Father. I'm going to add one today. It's in John 9, verses 1 through 3. And he went along and he saw a man blind from birth. And the disciples asked, who sinned, the man or his parents, that he was born blind? Because the teaching, part of the theology, so to speak, was that if your family had sinned somewhere, that your children were punished. And they